In this example, we are going to evaluate our inverse cosine functions. So in letter A, we have the cosine inverse of negative square root of 3 over 2. So we will start by figuring out what quadrant we're going to be in. For our cosine, if you think about the box on the previous page, we cannot have cosine in the third or the fourth quadrant. Our cosine, our inverse function, will only be between 0 and pi, giving us the first two quadrants. Cosine is positive in the first and negative in the second. Since we're taking the cosine of a negative number, that tells us that we're going to be in the second quadrant. So we'll create our triangle in the second quadrant. And if the cosine is negative square root of 3 over 2, that means that this length right here is going to be negative square root of 3 over 2. And if this is negative square root of 3 over 2, the angle across from square root of 3 over 2 would be 60. So this up here is 60, meaning this angle here is 30. And this is the angle that determines what radians we're going to be in. So if we have an angle of 30 degrees, that means we're dealing with a pi over 6 of some sort. So if we're in the first quadrant, it would be pi over 6, but if we're in the second quadrant, remember this could become 6 pi over 6, and one right before it would be 5 pi over 6. So the answer here is 5 pi over 6. Let's look at the second one, letter B. We have the arc cosine of negative 2. Well, the arc cosine of negative 2, right away you should say that this can't happen. It doesn't exist because of the domain. Remember, our domain for our inverse functions are from negative 1 to positive 1. And negative 2 does not lie within that domain. So this does not exist. And then finally, letter C, we have the cosine inverse of 0. So if we evaluate the cosine inverse of 0, we need to figure out when it's 0. So let's take a look at our graph. Our cosine lies, again, we can't be here or here. So that means if it's 0, it's got to be on one of our axes. So we could be here, we could be up here, or we could be over here on the left. So this is our point 1, 0, and this is a rotation of 0. This is the point 0, negative 1, and this is pi over 2. And this is negative 1, 0, and this is a rotation of pi. If we want the cosine to be 0, we are looking for the x value to be 0. So the only one that has an x value of 0 is this one right here, which is at pi over 2. So the cosine inverse of 0 is pi over 2. If you have questions, let me know. Otherwise, move down to the try this. So you can pause it now and unpause it when you're ready to check your answers. If you did letter A correctly, you should have ended up with 3 pi over 4. Letter B does not exist. And letter C would be 2 pi over 3. If you have questions, let me know.